Hello and welcome to my podcast. In this edition, I chat with Pete White, our long-term collaborator. Hi Pete, how are you doing today?
Morning, Carl. I am good. Thank you for having me on your first podcast here.
You're welcome. You're the guinea pig. Let's see how it goes.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether to feel a little bit privileged or a little bit apprehensive about this then.
Well, let's see how it goes. You know, I'm out of my comfort zone, and it's not something I'm used to doing. I may be calling you to do take 2, take 3, and take 4.
Great.
It's so, like I've said, Pete, I'm trying to make these podcasts a little bit irreverent and a bit fun. They're not going to be your general, you know, we're a branding agency, you're a web agency, this is what we can do for you. My intention is to talk to lots of associates, friends, customers, clients I've met over the years, and just generally have a chat. It's intended to be informal, and let's just see where we go. The 2 listeners I'll have, one of them will have heard of you, the other one won't have. So tell me a bit about yourself.
My name's Pete White, and I run 2 businesses basically here in the centre of Shrewsbury. So one is Information Solutions, so it's an IT company. We do small business IT support. We do a lot of cloud services like Office 365, Azure. It's small business IT support basically. The other business there is the Web Orchard, which is a web design and development agency. I get the best of both worlds in some ways of seeing everything from a techie point of view on the IT and from a marketing point of view on the web side of things. So it's great. It's great position to be in. And then there's various other things. We've got various side projects that I get involved in. We've got the Love Shrewsbury website. We have a company called Iraq Business News. We run the Shopgeek events and conferences. And there's just, I could go on and on.
Sounds endless.
It keeps me busy. In the time that I've got.
Fingers in lots of pies, Pete.
Try to, exactly. Whatever looks interesting, you know, you kind of you try and, you know, see how it goes really.
And you've got 3 small kids. How'd you fit it all in? How'd you manage it?
Oh, good question. So certainly a lot less since I've got the 3 kids, that's for sure. So they keep me busy evenings and weekends, and all good fun.
And one of my things in life is kind of giving chances and opportunities to young people, especially in this day and age. You know, I work in the creative industries, you're in the tech industries, and I'm keen to make sure young people get opportunities and kind of learn from people with experience. So can you tell me a bit about your journey, how you got to where you are today? Starting from a young age, really, not you know, from as a child, what were your kind of aims and aspirations, and how you got to where you are?
I think I've always had an interest in computers. You know, from when, you know, my parents first got the first computer sat at home in our dining room. It's you know, whether it was my dad teaching me DOS commands so we could play Command and Conquer, right, or Duke Nukem. It's always interested me from that early age, and you know, that kind of moved on from the early days of the internet, where we first had, you know, a dial-up modem to our, you know, getting our first ADSL connection, you know, half a meg connection back in, must have been 2001, that sort of time. And it was really that, it was almost a renaissance period for the internet. It's where, you know, there was new technologies coming along all the time. You were able to learn so much so quickly. You know, there was messenger programs like ICQ and MSN Messenger, and you could talk to your friends online. Yeah. Not only could you see them at school, you could then talk. And this is before we have mobile phones. Yeah. And that sort of stuff as well. So it caught me from quite an early age of learning these different technologies and learning the you know, the different components that would build up a computer. You know, what does a CPU do? What does a memory do? What's a hard drive? You know, we used to go to computer fairs to spend all of our hard-earned paper-round money.
Did you?
On computer components.
Did you?
And various other things.
What was your first computer, Pete? Can you remember?
The first proper computer we had was it was a Windows, or it would have been a Windows 3.1 486. And that must have been 94, 95 sort of time.
Right.
And that was before the internet, and we had that for many years before it got replaced by a computer in about '99 by a company called Tiny, and it was where you got these bundles. The bundles of a PC, a monitor, a printer,
right.
And ridiculous amounts of software that you were never going to use. But that's how they used to sell computers, and that was our first kind of internet-enabled computer, and that's where I started learning, the basics of websites, HTML, CSS, and then working out hosting and PHP and MySQL and all of those kind of emerging technologies that people were still kind of trying to work out how do you get the best out of them, or what can you do with these technologies, and that's where the interest came from that kind of early age, really.
Okay, I'm going to age myself here. My first computer at home was a ZX Spectrum, ZX81, and a ZX Spectrum, and it was fantastic. Basic coding, doing games, making graphics, and that inspired me in a way. It was such fun.
Yeah, I used to use a bit of software. I think it's called something like Aldus IntelliDraw.
Right.
Which was like a precursor to what Photoshop is today.
Yeah, we used Aldus Freehand. That was my first software in my first job.
Which I imagine is an Illustrator equivalent.
Yeah, it was.
Days.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And picking up the basics. We used to have a bit of software called Cubase as well, which we used to make little bits of music on.
Right.
And it was all the precursors to what we see today of these very mature bits of software. Back then, it was almost experimental in some ways.
It was mad, wasn't it? In my first job, we had one Apple Mac in the corner of the studio, and it was those tiny Mac Classics. You'd go there, you'd put a bit of type in, you'd print it off, then you'd trace it on a tracing pad. So different. Just on that, Things must have changed quite a lot for you in the years you've been working. What you've been doing this now for 15 years or so?
It was 15 years in July.
15 years in July. So, wow.
I wasn't sure whether to make a big deal about it or not, because it's a significant milestone. But equally, it is. Wow, I've been doing the same thing for 15 years almost.
Yeah, that's a long time.
In the end, look, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it, but yeah, it did seem quite a milestone. 15 years of working, just over 15 years outside of university.
But it's out there now, Pete. So our two listeners are going to know about it, aren't they? So they can spread the word. I'm 30 years next year, which is absolutely mad. 30 years next July since I had my first job. 30 years graduated, mad. Gone like that.
So it is. When I first started work, we were on Windows XP, Office 2003. OS X had just hit version, I think it was 10.3 at the time.
Right.
We were still carrying around iPods. It was pre-iPhone sort of period. The kind of the first smartphones that we had were not very smart at all in comparison, really, to what they do now.
A BlackBerry with a little keypad on there and basic internet access. It was just crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the first phone I had with a camera was a Sony Ericsson, and the camera was awful. Really, you couldn't take anything at night time. It was lucky whether it worked in the day as well.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Two questions, Pete. Right, the first one is anything that you miss that has changed over the years, and what's the biggest improvement you've seen?
Devices and everything, it seemed to be a lot simpler back then. Definitely with the simplicity. I mean, they did a lot less, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Phone back then, things were a lot simpler back then. The biggest improvement has got to be smartphones, and the way that sort of whole ecosystem has exploded in the last sort of 10, 12 years, real 13 years. 2008 wasn't it, the iPhone? So. The way that all of that has matured so quickly in such a short period of time has revolutionised, the way that we work. The idea of building, responsive websites, 15 years ago, it was unheard of. It wasn't such a thing. We had, the most monitor resolutions topped out about 1,200 pixels wide. And that was about it, really. We were still designing sites to sit on a 1024 by 768 display.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all the space that we had to deal with.
Yeah.
These days, we're building websites that sit from sort of 400 pixels wide up to 2,000 pixels wide. You know, there's such a range of devices and screen resolutions and screen sizes that we have to deal with now, and that's I would say that's one of the biggest changes we've seen on the website side of things. The IT is a little bit different. You get the software has matured. We've seen a big move towards cloud services.
Yeah.
And that's just an ongoing trend. I think that we're going to continue to see, over the coming years. The technology has definitely matured. I mean, if you think about where Windows XP was compared to what Windows 10 is now.
Windows for me is like, haven't got a clue. We're Mac
Well,
based. Windows is like, what are you talking about?
Think how OS X has changed then between version 9 and where we are today, version 11.
Oh God, yeah.
It's a similar sort of, the journey, isn't it? The way that, the systems do so much more. They make our lives easier in some ways, harder in other ways.
Yeah.
But they're just matured systems, aren't they? As opposed to a whole new classification of devices like we've seen with smartphones.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get a bit more personal now. What would you tell your 18-year-old self, knowing what you know now? What would you go back and say?
Oh, to go buy Bitcoin. to go.
Have you bought any? Have you got any?
Oh yeah. I'm big into crypto, so yeah. It's for me, it's one of the most exciting spaces in tech at the moment. Not Bitcoin specifically, but blockchain and blockchain technology. It's like the internet was, in the late 90s, early 2000s at the moment. You've got so much innovation out there. So many projects that are in a lot of cases solving some really good real world problems.
Yeah.
A lot of projects will fail. There's some bad ideas out there as good ideas, but we're in that period where there is so much work going on in that space, and there's so many very intelligent people and very intelligent companies doing some very interesting things with blockchain technology. Science space.
Someone said to me recently, somebody I respect, said 100 years ago we had the Industrial Revolution and it lasted, 40, 50 years. They think we're only at the start of the tech revolution. It started 20 years ago and things are changing so much. We're not even halfway through it yet.
Yeah, I mean, and technology it's only heading one way, and if we see, from our IT customer base, the amount of technology they use, the amount of software, the services, the hardware, it's only going in one direction. It's only increasing. And we're seeing industries that were maybe historically a little bit anti-technology or didn't use it. They are now embracing technology. And maybe even partly down to the pandemic, all of that has massively
changed the world, hasn't it?
Sped up.
Changed the world completely.
In some ways, it's forced people to adopt this technology because they're in a situation now where they can't plead ignorance.
Yeah.
They have to learn how to use Zoom. They have to learn how to use Teams.
Yeah.
To work now.
I'm a great example. I didn't do a Teams call until a year last March. Then all of a sudden, that's all I did for a year. And now we're doing it 50-50. So I'm saving time on traveling just by doing this. I can meet people from the studio. It's fantastic, isn't it?
No, it's completely changed. And I know a lot of organisations are exactly the same. And, we quite like this way of working, this kind of hybrid approach to working.
The only thing is, it's like Mac and PC. It's Teams or Zoom.
No, I know.
And I can't use Zoom. It's Teams all the way for us. And I get the odd client who wants to use Zoom, and I just can't. It just doesn't seem to work for us. It's so frustrating.
We sit in this Microsoft kind of workspace with a lot of our customers, and I think if you're already on that 365 stack, it makes sense to use Teams because it's just included as part of the service.
Yeah.
If you sit outside of that ecosystem, then that's where Zoom would really
it's Zoom, isn't it?
It's Zoom. Those areas,
it's Zoom. So what did you tell your 18-year-old self there, Pete? I'm not sure what you said.
I think I started with a quick about buying Bitcoin there.
Yeah, was that it? Was it buy more Bitcoin? Was that it? Invest in cryptocurrency? Is that it?
I think I might tell them to maybe even take more risks. You know, be experiment more. Just be a bit more risky in your approach to how you deal with things. Take the leap of faith on certain areas and see where it gets you.
Yeah, what's the worst that can happen?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's easy to see that with hindsight, isn't it?
Right, I've lost my train of thought here. So let's talk a bit about any brands out there you find inspirational. Any brands that you kind of aspire to and look up to. Don't have to be in the tech sector. In it across any sector.
Oh, it's the whole cliche of saying Apple, isn't it, on these things?
Yeah.
But
I should have said, don't say Apple, don't say BMW, don't say John Lewis. It's all.
Growing up, I was always a big admirer of Richard Branson and the Virgin Group.
Okay.
Maybe not so much in recent times with the whole Virgin Atlantic debacles from a year and a half ago. But there was, when I was growing up, there was very few British entrepreneurs, like Richard Branson.
Yeah, yeah.
If you think of, of some of the more maverick people, they're often American.
Yeah.
Whereas Richard Branson, this British guy with some interesting businesses, doing crazy things in hot air balloons and
that appeals.
Various other adventures. He was quite unique in that respect, and I did like Richard Branson, at the time, and what he was doing, the way that he would experiment with stuff like cola and festivals and radio.
Yeah, I forgot he did cola, didn't he? I forgot that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Virgin Cola. Yeah.
There's an interesting story about Virgin Cola, about how he annoyed Coca-Cola a little bit too much, and they ended up just flooding the market and almost getting Virgin Cola removed from British stores.
Oh, really?
There's an interesting story around that, but which basically killed it in the end.
Right.
But,
because it's gone. It's gone now. It's gone, isn't it? Yeah, it's not around.
Yeah, it's.
I'd forgotten about it. For me, Virgin started off as a record label, and that was their core thing. Because I'm a bit older than you, so for me in the 80s, lots of the band's artists were on Virgin Records, and that was the foundation for me. Then came Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Radio, and I personally felt over the years the brand got watered down. He did Virgin Money, which went under, the Virgin Balloons, and I felt it got watered down over the years. But initially, great impact.
I love that how he wasn't afraid to try new things.
Yeah.
We have a culture in this country of not accepting failure. Yeah, he was happy to try something new, and if it didn't work, fair enough.
Yeah.
Even now what they're doing with Hyperloop and his rockets and stuff, it's still kind of quite a forefront of technology in a lot of ways.
So are you booked on a flight then? In space?
Yeah.
Use your Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly.
When your Bitcoin goes through the roof, you can do that, can't you? The person who inspired me like that was Terence Conran. I don't know if you heard of him. Yeah. He started Habitat, the Conran shop, and back in the sort of 70s, in the 80s when I was kind of learning about this sort of stuff, he was so inspirational. Again, himself as a brand, the work that he did, he had lots of failures, he bounced back every time, and was really, for me, iconic. And this person who said, you can do this in Britain. You can build this brand up, and I was a massive fan of him. Right, so where are we? How have the last 18 months been for you? Because it's been a testing time for lots of our clients have flourished, lots of them have really struggled, and some in the middle have just kind of ticked over. But how's it been for you in the last 18 months, Pete?
We're in a fortunate industry in a lot of ways. We're in an industry where the pandemic has created extra demand, and thus the technology has allowed us, and our staff to work from home.
Yeah.
and do a lot of the sort of things that we would have done from an office. So we're very fortunate in those respects. I would say the last 3 to 4 months have been the trickiest.
Right.
We've seen, with a lot of sort of tech companies with staff moving on and moving around, that we haven't been immune from that. And I think in some ways those sorts of issues affects smaller businesses like us a lot more than, the big corporates that have HR departments and big recruitment drives and that sort of stuff. It's much more difficult for smaller companies like us to weather those sorts of storms. So I would say the last few months have been a lot trickier. I think we're through that now. But that's definitely been the hard areas in throughout the pandemic, really.
Yeah. Tell me something about yourself that would surprise people. So our 2 listeners, what's going to surprise them?
Oh, I've just been told there's 3 listeners now. Sorry, there's 3 listeners now. So, what would surprise them about you?
I used to run a radio show at university.
Oh, really?
So,
you're a natural, Pete. I knew it.
I've not done it for 15 years since then, which in some ways I regret. But
Right. Okay.
The final year at university, we used to run a radio show on a Monday night between 7 and 9.
Okay.
Which was primarily, electronic music. And
Okay.
DJs and so we used to curate playlists from music we would found online illegally, as it turns out.
Okay.
But we even got to the point where there was other DJs on campus that would send us mixes that we'd play on the show.
Okay.
There was a few record labels that we got to know that would send us some of their tracks early on.
Okay.
It's amazing what you could just get by emailing people.
Was it mainstream stuff, or was it underground stuff, or a bit of both? Are we using Napster? Was it Napster back in those days that you're using to?
I think we were just past Napster. I can't remember the technology, the programs that we were using at the time, but it was that sort of time anyway, where you could easily find, music. It was before they had Spotify. And,
Right. Yeah.
Those sorts of things.
So DJ Pete White.
Yeah, exactly. So
Talking through the night.
We used to run that show, and it was great fun being able to do that sort of thing.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So
An unknown fact about Pete. Just a couple more questions, Pete. Then we'll wrap it up. Any career or job other than your own that you fancy trying, that you I wish I'd done that?
I'm not necessarily sure about a different job, but I do wish I'd maybe spent a couple of years post university in London, or maybe a foreign city, that sort of stuff.
Right.
So I was fortunate in many ways of the kind of the job that I landed post university and the opportunities that give me. But I think I would have quite liked to have spent a couple of years, in London, or maybe Manchester, Birmingham, those sorts of places. I enjoy going back there now.
Yeah.
And kind of think, well, actually, it would have been quite nice to have lived there for a while. It's not practical now with family and other commitments and that sort of stuff, but it would have been quite nice at the time. So not necessarily a change in career or doing something else, but it would have made it nice to do it from a different location, from a city, that sort of thing.
yeah.
You can do anything. You can work anywhere now. Back in my day, you had to go to a big city. You had to do your kind of apprenticeship in London or somewhere else and work at an agency. But those days are gone now. I think you can do what we do from anywhere.
Absolutely,
yeah, exactly.
anywhere.
And we've got some lovely offices. We've got some nice environmentally friendly offices here with the solar panels and the heat recovery systems and so on. And we've got a great team and we've got a nice client base. So there's a lot to be said for where we are now, really.
What's one question you wish I'd asked you, or you thought I would have asked you?
I'm glad you've not just come and asked me what my strengths and weaknesses are.
Nah.
That's
Pete, I've known you about 10 years now. I think I know those. So, mine. So it's kind of.
I don't know. It's a difficult one to answer that. So I'm going to dodge that question.
All right, fair enough.
And